Okay, so I'm going to cut right to the chase and start reviewing this game. I'm not going to talk about how Capcom hates Mega Man or how I want a Mega Man X9 more than do a cartoon show. What the heck, Capcom? I'm just going to explain why I love Mega Man X. Without further ado, let's begin. Okay, so for a bit of a history lesson, Mega Man X was released in America in 1993, a couple months before Mega Man 6. That's all I have to say there, I didn't do much research. So first off, let's talk about the first thing you see when you boot up the game, and that is the graphics. My gosh, is Mega Man looking sexy in 16-bit. Everything, whether it be friend or foe, has nice colors and animates nicely. All the game's graphical assets just have this cool look to them. Namely X. That's right, our hero of the day is not Mega Man, but Mega Man X, whom I will refer to from now on as X. Because that's how they refer to him in the later games. The X in his name stands for the variable X, meaning infinite possibilities, because you can literally store any number into a variable. X was made by Dr. Light during his final years. Dr. Light wanted X to be able to think and feel for himself, and to use his infinite possibilities for the greater good. Before Dr. Light died, X was shut down to be tested by a program for X amount of years. After these years, X is found by Dr. Kane, who is fascinated by X's ability to think for himself, and he makes a new line of robots with the same ability. This new generation of robots are called Reploids, robots that have the ability to think for themselves and make their own decisions. But with this free will comes the occasional rogue Reploid who disobeys the human laws. These Reploids are known as Mavericks. Humanity doesn't like the criminal Mavericks and creates an organization of highly skilled Reploids called Maverick Hunters. The leader of said organization is Sigma, and among their ranks is X himself. Along with X is his mentor figure, Zero. The long blonde-haired red-armored warrior is among one of the most skilled Reploids. And he's also one of my favorite characters in any video game series ever, just as a side note. Sigma sees X's infinite possibilities and believes he could use it to usher the world in a new age. And just like every other bad guy, that means destroying the old world. And soon he becomes obsessed. After a battle that nearly kills X and Zero, Sigma uses his influence to get some of the higher-ranking hunters on his side, and he uses them to wreak havoc on their corresponding areas. The newly dubbed Maverick Sigma and his cronies, I guess, lie in wait for someone to stop them, for lack of better storytelling. How sinister. That took a while to describe. We start the game in the intro stage, which is an okay stage. It teaches the player the basics, and one of the things you will instantly notice is the control. It has the same jump arc as classic Mega Man. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But because of X's bigger sprite, it feels more streamlined. It just flows. Speaking of having games flow, have you ever seen a wall in a Mega Man game and thought, wow, I want to get over that wall without using special weapons? Well, now you can. One of the big changes Mega Man X brings to the table is the addition of the wall jump. You can now scale a single wall by hugging the wall and pressing the jump button. It adds a certain flow to the level design that I love. It's like non-stop movement and I gosh dang love it! Speaking of non-stop movement, after you beat the intro stage, you have 8 Mavericks to go to and put in your place. You know, non-stop movement because you can just go to any stage in any order you like. Made sense in the script. You should always start with Chill Penguin, because halfway through this stage you come across this blue capsule called a light capsule. In it, you'll gain the leg parts, one of 4 armor pieces you can find to upgrade X. The leg part grants you the dash, which would become a default ability in the later games. The dash is a small burst of speed that is activated by pressing the A button on the controller. At first, it may seem like just that, a burst of speed, but as you go along it becomes a dodging maneuver, a way to blaze through stages at maximum velocity. I seriously love this maneuver. Later in the game you can find the body part, which cuts damage taken by half, the arm part, which allows a 3rd level of charge and also lets you charge special weapons, and the head part, which breaks blocks. That's literally all it does. By collecting all the pieces, you have assembled the first armor. Creative name, I know. Speaking of collecting things, you may have noticed how tiny X's health bar is. That's because in every stage, if you look hard enough, you can find these heart containers to extend your health a bit. There are 8 of them in total, and I recommend you find all of them, especially your first time through. Heart containers and armor parts aren't the only thing to collect. You can find sub-tanks as well. There are 4 in total, and they are basically a better E-tank, because unlike E-tanks, these are not one-time use items, but they are refillable health containers to be consumed at your desire. Way better than the classic games. To fill up a tank, you must be at full health, then collect a health recovering item. The excess energy will then be dumped into your sub-tanks, which will eventually fill up. Then if you feel you aren't particularly fond of dying at that specific moment, just open the menu and down one of those suckers. The best part is you can use them even if they aren't full. I love these items, but be careful, you can accidentally activate one while still at full health and watch in horror as one of your precious tanks is completely sucked dry for no reason. You are going to need those tanks your first couple of playthroughs because this game, while fun, is kind of difficult your first couple of times. The difficulty of this game is hard, but fair. The levels feel pretty well balanced, but this is coming from a veteran, so don't take my opinion at face value. The bosses, on the other hand, I know for a fact, are not well balanced. Some of these bosses will grind you into a pulp your first time, with no mercy, until you use their corresponding weakness, which is where these bosses fall flat on their face, because almost every boss gets utterly destroyed by its weakness. It's like, seriously, this guy was giving me trouble? With a few exceptions, those being the Sigma Palace bosses. The final boss, namely, it is really hard. But you know what, let's talk a little bit more about the levels, because these levels, after many playthroughs, are super fun to blast through while having a blast. It feels like these levels were made with speedrunning in mind, which is the kind of level design I absolutely adore. Like I said earlier, X's moveset allows for constant fast-paced movement, and these levels are cleverly designed around this, allowing for a super fun time. Have I mentioned that I love this game? The levels have this pretty cool gimmick where, depending on which levels you beat in what order, certain level environments will invade other levels, like if you beat Storm Eagle, his ship will crash into Spark Mandrel's stage, destroying the power unit, leading to these really cool darkness segments that with careful practice can be beaten in under 7 seconds, I think. Another effect is if you beat Chill Penguin first, when you eventually get to Flame Mammoth, the icy environment will freeze over the lava in his stage, letting you get this heart tank under the platform there. There are a couple more effects, but I don't feel like explaining every single one of them. This kind of mechanic would be brought back in X3 and pioneered for the worst in X6. We'll get to that when we get to that somewhere long down the road. Have I mentioned that the music in this game is awesome? The soundtrack as a whole mostly has this radical 90s rock vibe to it, and I absolutely love it. Granted, not all the tracks are rock, but a good chunk of them, like my favorite song in the game, Sigma Palace 2. Speaking of the Sigma Palace, why don't we start wrapping this up by talking about the final levels. The first Sigma Palace has this tricky section with these moving platforms over a bottomless pit, but with practice it can be conquered. You then have a face-off with Vile, whom I purposely didn't mention until now. He's your average sub-antagonist of the day. After he beats you into next week, Zero sacrifices himself to give you a chance at beating him. Don't worry, as Zero himself says in X6, he never dies. After ripping Vile to shreds, we get this emotional cutscene where Zero dies. And we're now super mad at Sigma. The level continues after that, and we get to the real boss of this level, Boss Spider. What an awesome name. This boss is super hard. It hits like a tank, and the amount of time you have to hit the eye when it opens is minuscule. And its weakness, the shotgun ice, only deals 2 to 4 damage, so you're going to be here for a while your first try, but you can beat him with enough perseverance. After you watch him be blown to bits, you will continue on to Sigma Palace 2. This is my favorite stage in the game. It has some really cool platforming segments, and the music, like I mentioned, is awesome! This level also has the perfect length, just as a side note. But after that awesome level, we face the boss of Sigma Palace 2, which is the most amazing thing ever. It's a face the size of the screen, with circle eyes, an enemy thing for a nose, spikes for teeth, and its name is Rangda Bangda! It's super obnoxious, but I love it. The eyes open up and do different attacks based on their color, and when they decide they've been open long enough, they go back into their sockets. The walls close in and the nose starts bolting around. Like I just said, ridiculous. But I love it just because of how paranormal and goofy it is compared to the rest of the game. Rangda Bangda would return in MegaMan X5, where it is sadly not as cool in my opinion. After we send that atrocity to the scrap heap, we go to, you guessed it, Sigma Palace 3. It's your average level, with enemies, platforming, and pretty cool music. The only really notable thing about this level is this glitch right here. Not only is it good for speedrunning, but it is hilarious to watch. The first time I showed Corbin this glitch, he nearly fell out of his seat. On a different note, I purposely didn't mention it up until this point, but the boss rush is not really a boss rush in this game. More, you face the bosses one by one throughout 3 of the 4 final castles, which might I say is way better than the usual do them all at once boss rush that literally every other Mega Man game has. The boss of Sigma Castle 3 is called D-Rex, and he's pretty bland. He only has really 2 attacks, and the only hard thing about him is that he deals a bit too much damage. But that shouldn't really be an issue if you use his weakness, because he goes down like a good 6 to 8 hits, I think. With that done and over with, it's finally time for Sigma Palace 4, where we finally face Sigma's dog? This is Velgarder, Sigma's dog, who is not very hard and never comes back for the whole rest of the series. After he put his dog down, Sigma says, "Quite impressive. Now fight me for real." The fight begins and... Is that a green lightsaber? Well, the trailers lied. I guess Sigma is the real Last Jedi. He isn't that hard, he just moves pretty fast, and after we show Sigma the power of our X-Buster, his head falls down. And floats up. What the... I guess now Sigma's ready to show us his final form! This is Wolf Sigma, and there are 2 issues with this boss. Every time any of his attacks hit you, they take away a whole third of your health bar! I hope you filled up your sub-tanks in the corridor below, because... And that's not even the worst part. If you die to him, you have to start the whole thing over from the beginning of the whole level, starting once again with Velgarder. Jeez, I know you guys wanted to make the final boss hard and stuff, but this is super unfair for first-timers. I mean, I never die to him anymore because of how often I play, but that's because of how often I play. I know what you Mega Man X fans are thinking, and oh, just you wait. I have a ton to rage about on X3's final boss. Just you wait. Anyway, after that great final boss, the credits roll and X wonders if he will have to fight again. Just you wait, buddy. Just you wait. And with that, the game is over. If I haven't made it clear up to this point, I love this game. From the graphics to the music, I love it! And by far the best thing about this game is the replayability. What order do you take the bosses in? Do you use their weakness, or do you try to buster only them? Do you use special weapons at all? Do you try to collect as little items as possible, or do you go for 100%? Do you take your time, or do you beat the game as quick as possible? Do you complete the first armor, or do you only get the leg parts? There are so many ways to play, so many different strategies to levels, depending on what order you go in, and this makes me love this game because there is always something new to do. This really is Mega Man X. X meaning limitless possibilities. The game stays true to its title. There are so many more things I could say, but then we'd be here for a couple hours, and I do not want to waste your guys' time. So with that, I give this game the highest recommendation I possibly can. You can get it on the X Collection on the PS2 and the GameCube, or if you have a Wii U, it's on the eShop for $8, but it doesn't matter how, just play this game, then play it again, then play it 100 more times. This has been Talmadge of CTA-Gaming. I love this game, and I'll see you guys next time. But until then, take care. Just as a side note, this script was really hard to write.